Hello, Atomy members. I have come today to talk to you about what is different in the era of 100 years. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Hwang Jun-won, and I run a platform called Maef, which focuses on the future. My main work involves researching how our future lives will change and conveying that information to you. I give lectures, appear on broadcasts, and create content on YouTube. I also write books to easily convey these future changes. When we think about the future, there are actually many factors that will impact our lives. The areas I mainly cover are these, but today I would like to talk about what is different in relation to the trend of the 100-year life era. In fact, it's quite interesting to discuss the era of living to 100. Because if we look back to 1914, the probability of a child born that year living to be over 100 years old was almost negligible. At that time, only 1% of people could live past 100. But now, with advancements in medical technology, the number of people exceeding 100 years of age is continuously increasing. What you should not misunderstand here is that the 100-year life era means an increase in the number of people living beyond 100 years. But in fact, the average life expectancy for children born today is around 80 years. In the mid-80s, we see that the 100-year life era is characterized by an increasing number of people living beyond 100 years. This is how we can understand it. So, I have organized some points about what is different in this 100-year life era. The first point is that the three-stage model we have known is beginning to collapse. We have originally lived our lives in 3 stages. The period of receiving education is almost the same, until the age of 20. Next, there was a period of working. If we used to have a typical 3-stage life where we worked, then retired and enjoyed retirement, this changes with the advent of the 100-year life era. When you reach 100 years old, the duration of education remains the same, which is until the age of 20. The increasing duration refers to the fact that the period during which we work can extend all the way to around 80 years, which can be seen as the biggest difference. This is because living to 100 years requires money, and the retirement age inevitably gets pushed back. But if we look at it this way, it seems just like the 3-stage model. What is different? It means that I need to continuously transform myself through re-education during the working period. I may always be employed in a regular position, but I could also choose to quit and become a non-regular worker. You may become a freelancer, start a business, or take on various roles, which is why re-education is necessary. So, I would like to ask you some questions. It would be good for you to consider whether you are planning your life according to the existing 3-stage model or the 4-stage model. The reason we need to think in multiple stages is another difference of the 100-year life era. In the end, even regular positions can only be long-term, temporary jobs. In fact, the duration of regular employment is indeed getting longer. While we usually thought of a retirement age of 50, it is now extending to 65 in many cases. In Japan, there are even proposals to extend it to 70. The problem is that even if one works until the age of 65, life does not come to an end. If we assume that we will live in the 100-year life era, it might be acceptable to just retire at 65 and spend the rest of our time relaxing. However, the reality is that many people do not actually live that way. In particular, in the case of South Korea, the elderly poverty rate is the highest among OECD member countries, which means there are many people who are not in that situation. Now, what are the issues with regular employment? Even if one works until the age of 65, when they try to do something else afterward, their abilities may not be effectively utilized elsewhere. As you have seen in the previous scene, there could be a phenomenon of capability entrapment. Throughout a lifetime, one may have built their career in a single job, only to find out that they were digging themselves into a hole. Therefore, there is a risk that one may become trapped in this situation and unable to pursue other opportunities. So, when we reach the age of 65 or 70 and find ourselves lacking the ability to engage in economic activities outside of an organization and to live independently, it creates a rather ambiguous situation regarding whether we should consider ourselves adults or children. This is a situation we need to pay attention to. Therefore, we must consider whether it is possible to engage in economic activities outside of a company or organization. I believe this part is also quite important in the context of the 100-year life era. The third difference related to this is that we need to engage in lifelong learning. Therefore, you should consider whether this lifelong learning is a disaster or a blessing. If you perceive the need to continuously develop yourself and receive education during the 100-year life era as a disaster, it may be quite challenging for you to navigate a life of 100 years. Let's think about why we need to continue receiving re-education by considering what has happened over the past 100 years. There were 2 world wars, and our country has gone through the history of liberation. After that, the Cold War system collapsed. You remember the Soviet Union, right? The collapse of the Soviet Union marked the beginning of the Mica era, where almost everyone started driving cars, and computers began to be distributed in every household. Additionally, a significant change occurred as we all started carrying smartphones, just like we do now. However, the changes did not stop there. Right now, with the advent of self-driving cars and artificial intelligence, there are so many changes happening that if you let your guard down for just a moment, you can easily miss them. So, let's think about it. How much greater will the changes be as we continue to live in the future? It feels overwhelming. We have no choice but to continue our lifelong education. Well, it is possible that we are living in an era where the answers I once knew become wrong. If you become too trapped in existing thoughts and insist on them, you may miss out on various opportunities. In this regard, Alvin Toffler, who wrote The Third Wave, also made such remarks. In the 21st century, illiteracy is not defined as someone who cannot read or write, but rather as someone who learns and then forgets what they have learned and is unable to learn again. I think it would be good for you to consider whether you might be illiterate in the 21st century. Just being able to read text does not mean you are not illiterate. So, if we think about it, strengthening your expertise in your current field could be an important and effective way to navigate the white era. You might be considering a career transition in a similar field to what you are currently good at, interested in, or have been doing. Alternatively, you may also be attempting to shift to a completely different career. Also, starting something as a hobby little by little can eventually turn into a full-fledged profession. Since this means that something you enjoyed is becoming profitable, it might be beneficial for you to invest in it gradually. I believe it is also very important for you to systematize your income. Living in the era of a 100-year life, the age of longevity, seems to be just like this. Longevity is not free. It requires a lot of money, and one has to work for a lifetime. But if one's health deteriorates, that can become quite difficult. Therefore, you should think about various ways to systematize your income. The important point is that during this 100-year multi-stage life, I may face a situation where I need to decide what to study and which direction to take, even after turning 70 or 80. In that process, I think the most important thing is flexibility. We often encounter people like that in our lives. How can I do that job? I've only studied this, so how can I do that? I've only done this my whole life, so how can I do that? There are people who are completely confined to their own fields, and that may not necessarily be a bad thing. However, instead of being stubborn, having a broader perspective and responding flexibly to changes can be one way to navigate the white era. So, I would like to ask you another question. Is lifelong learning a blessing or a curse for you? If you live a life enjoying learning these things, I think it could be a good way to live your one and only life well. So the fourth point I want to mention is that we will have periods of rest as we go through life. How to spend that break as a time for re-education and recharging seems to be becoming quite important. As I mentioned earlier, we need to continue receiving re-education while working and adapt to changes. In the midst of this, we may find ourselves having breaks that we wanted or did not want. You can take a break in your 20s. You can take a break in your 30s. You can take a break in your 40s. And there may be times when you find yourself taking a break, whether you wanted it or not. How will you utilize this time? It would be a waste to just give up and say that there are no jobs available. So, I think it is quite important to make good use of this time. And this transitional period, taking proper rest, is also important. I believe that receiving some form of re-education during this period to upgrade myself is also very important. So, it turns out that we might need to invest a little money into this education. Of course, the government provides a lot of support, but this leads to financial considerations. In the case of the traditional three-stage life model, during the high growth period, we had lifetime employment, which guaranteed continuous employment. And if you stayed with the company, your salary would increase. So, if we lived under the existing three-stage model, we would start earning money as soon as we got a job, see our salaries increase, accumulate wealth, and then experience a decline in our finances after retirement. However, in the future, there will be periods of rest, whether we want them or not, during which I will need to spend money. And while receiving re-education, there may be a need to spend money as well. Therefore, it is necessary for us to prepare our financial situation during this period. During this break, my financial situation has been slightly depleted. Then it goes back up, then it gets depleted again, and then it rises again. This is how it has been. So, during this period of rest, how about including the money I will spend and the funds for re-education in my 100-year life plan? So, how you utilize your break period could change the 100-year life era. During this time, it seems we shouldn't only focus on tangible assets like money or real estate. Have you heard of intangible assets? Intangible assets, as the name suggests, have no physical form. They are not like real estate or money. What are some examples of intangible assets? First, there is technical knowledge. This is my own knowledge that cannot be taken away by anyone. So the question is how much of this can be accumulated? And the reputation of people around you is really important. As we have to live a 100-year life, the relationships with those around us are becoming quite significant. Also, I believe that the asset of influence is very important. In today's era, you all watch a lot of YouTube, right? The influence of individual creators has significantly increased, and as a result, you will see that this influence is often connected to revenue. So, hone your skills in your respective fields and effectively promote them through social media, considering how much influence you can have on others. This aspect seems to be becoming quite important in the current era and in the future. Health is undoubtedly an important intangible asset. Human relationships can also be viewed as a very similar intangible asset to reputation. Attraction is also an intangible asset. In fact, even if one does not have any special skills, there are advantages to improving human relationships and approaching others simply through attraction. Therefore, it would be beneficial for us to practice how we can appeal to others attractively. Positivity is really important. We have to live in the 100-year era, and there will be various risks, right? Thinking about those things makes you feel like, oh no, it's all over. If you think this way, you won't find answers in life. Therefore, I would say that positivity is extremely important. An outgoing personality can also play a very important role in living a life of 100 years. And besides that, flexibility, as I mentioned earlier. How flexibly can we adapt when making choices and changes? And how open-minded will one be towards various possibilities? As we live to be 100 years old and the world changes, it can be dangerous to be trapped in past thinking. I wonder if I am missing something. Why do others think this way? Having openness in this way can be seen as a significant intangible asset. Therefore, to summarize, it is quite important to become a useful person over the course of 100 years. It can be said that ultimately the point is to become a happy person over the course of 100 years. So, I think it would be good for you to consider how you are building your intangible assets. And finally, regarding the differences in the 100-year life era. If the management of our bodies over 100 years breaks down, it will really create a significant problem. There is a saying that when you are young, you spend your health to earn money, and when you are old, you spend your money to maintain your health. In fact, you will see that 32% of our money and assets will be spent on medical expenses. From the ages of 70 to 85, almost all of the expenses will be for healthcare. And our life expectancy has increased a bit. As of 2015, it was about 82.1 years. However, this is life expectancy, and healthy life expectancy is different. The healthy lifespan is 73.2 years, resulting in a difference of about 10 years. Reducing this gap will become quite important. Therefore, exercising for body management is essential, and dietary habits will be significantly connected to your product. Sales. You all probably know this, but let me add one thing. These days, with discussions about carbon neutrality, there has been a lot of talk about the climate crisis. The environment is also quite important for managing our bodies. No matter how well I take care of myself, if the surrounding environment deteriorates, it can have a negative impact on me. And we are going to live to be 100 years old, right? If we live 100 years old but the environment deteriorates with increasing fine dust and outbreaks of infectious diseases like COVID-19, it will ultimately have a negative impact on our future. Therefore, it is not just about thinking of future generations or descendants. In fact, while living in the 100-year life era, we need to pay attention to our environment and climate for our own later years. So it would be good to think about whether you are taking good care of your body, which you will use for 100 years. And as we live in the 100-year life era, we also need to consider the aspect of a super-age society. The fact that more people are living beyond 100 years means that the number of elderly individuals will ultimately increase. Let's take a look at what happens in such a society. This is the current structure of our population, and it will change like this in the future. The areas in which you sell will inevitably be related to the population structure. In the past, South Korea was filled with young people, but in the future it will transition into a new normal state filled with elderly individuals. So let's consider what aspects will change in this era. First, in Japan, which is ahead of us in this situation, there is also a phenomenon known as shopping refugees. Shopping refugees literally refer to the increasing number of elderly people who find it difficult to go out to buy daily necessities. This is a video interview with elderly people in Japan. Even though it is not far from Tokyo, as young people leave and the population begins to decline, stores start to disappear. As a result, it becomes harder to purchase goods. Consequently, we see the emergence of trucks bringing goods to sell, which seems to be closely related to future door-to-door sales in a super-aged society. This is not just about sales. It plays a significant role in reducing feelings of isolation and severed human connections, such as providing companionship. Additionally, in areas experiencing population decline, community stores are also emerging. A community store is a shop that residents have opened together by pooling their resources. They have opened up a space where they package small quantities of various foods to sell to the elderly, and they have also created an area where people can gather and share meals together. It is said that for those who are unable to come due to mobility issues, volunteers are even delivering to them. In a super-aged society, such things can unfold. And when considering a super-aged society, you don't need to look only at South Korea. If we take a look at our neighboring country, China, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal. Within 10 years, the population of people aged 60 and over in the United States is expected to increase, surpassing that of China. The population of the United States exceeds 300 million, but even the population of China, aged 60 and over, surpasses 300 million. It will become a very large market. There are countless opportunities we can think of in relation to aging. It would be good to think about how to connect these things to your business area and explore them in an interesting way. Also, this is an example from Japan. Adults are wearing diapers and having a fashion show like that. What is going on? Is it strange to the Japanese people? In Japan, due to the aging population. Adult diapers have started to sell more than baby diapers. This indicates a complete shift in the consumer target. Moreover, it is a very important fact in the food sector that we cannot ignore the elderly. As older adults often have poor dental health and weaker digestive systems, they tend to eat less and more slowly. Therefore, the nutritional value of their food needs to be increased. Ultimately, these health supplements are bound to become quite important. And related to that, what kind of foods are there? There are foods that are easy to eat and a bit softer, right? There will be many more products like this, soft food, in the future, and companies in Germany are emerging that create them in pureed form and print them in the shape of chicken legs using 3D printers. Opportunities are emerging that take into account nutrition, taste, and such factors. And now, I will show you a case that I really like. It is an example of how the beauty and makeup sector, which could be seen as predictable, has created opportunities by integrating with the aging population. The name of this case is called Beauty Touch Therapist. It is a psychological therapy business that visits the elderly, gives them beautiful massages, and does their makeup to make them feel good. How good do you feel after putting on makeup for the first time in a while? Right. We are currently seeing the before and after. By mixing your business area with other elements of the aging trend, you can create completely new opportunities. I think it would be good to try to integrate it well. Then lastly, I don't think I can leave this topic out. As we live in the 100-year life era, the number of people gradually passing away is increasing, leading to the opening of the era of Sosandasa. We are entering an era where the number of births is low, while the number of deaths is increasing. As you can see, the number of deaths in South Korea is currently around 300,000, which is quite similar. But in the future, this is expected to nearly double. We will be living in a society where the number of deaths will more than double. As a result, various businesses related to death are emerging in Japan. The term Jongwal is being coined as a new word, which literally means activity. As part of this, ending notes are also being distributed. It is said that an ending note is a type of note where one writes various stories and messages they want to leave behind, similar to a will, and that it has been distributed in a certain city. Well, in Japan, various businesses related to death are emerging. Let's take a look at what they are. For instance, there are pre-consultation meetings for cemetery tours. Another attempt involves hosting an event that brings together related industries such as burial inheritance, wills, and caregiving. There are also seminars on legal consultations such as writing wills. Additionally, there are bus tours that allow people to visit contribution cemeteries and columbariums. Now, if you only look at the yellow part, it seems like a very exciting event. But it is quite interesting that this is all an event preparing for death. As a result, businesses related to death are inevitably and gradually shifting from a passive sales approach to a more proactive one. So, if we enter an era of small-scale living, various businesses related to death will emerge. In the end, as many people pass away, there will likely be a need for simplification in the future as well. If so many people are passing away, it would be socially costly to handle their funerals with the same expenses as we do now. So, a small funeral will take place. And in Japan, there is a business related to this called a corpse hotel. The words themselves may sound a bit scary, but this is actually a quite interesting business idea. It is a facility that slightly modifies hotel-like spaces to allow for very simple funeral services. It is said that the cost can be reduced to 1/10 of traditional funerals. Therefore, spaces are being prepared where bereaved families can simply wash the deceased. What do you think? There may still be difficulties in South Korea, but if we enter an era of abundant diversity in the future, opportunities in this area could arise. So we have explored various discussions about what is different in the era of the 100-year life. I hope I have been helpful to you. There will truly be a variety of opportunities related to the 100-year life, starting from caregiving to healthcare, self-development, and active life, as well as the various businesses related to death that I briefly mentioned earlier, there will definitely be a range of opportunities. So, if you can effectively combine the work you do and your interests with these trends, you will be able to create your own opportunities. I think that instead of simply having a conventional job, you might have the opportunity to create your own unique career. If you carry on with your lives in that way, I believe a new opportunity will open up for you to live fully in the 100-year era. Then, I will conclude by asking you one final question. What are you preparing for your 100-year life era